cause for why you were shot was because you joined the army. He said that's what happens when you become a soldier. You shoot bullets at others, so others will shoot bullets at you. And some of those bullets will hit. If you looked at the contract before you joined the army, you would have seen in the small print that you're liable to be shot by bullets. Most people they would miss, but you got hit. That is the reason why you got shot, because you were a soldier. And he extended that to being born a human being. If you had only read the contract before you were born, you would have seen in the bottom it said that you can get disabled by a brain tumour, by cancer, by a safe falling from on the 14th story while you're underneath it. There's many, many things which can happen to you. That this is part of our life. That these things will happen to some of you. For example, one of the little techniques which I use to tell you about what your life is all about, I look in the room and I do a quick calculation of how many people are in this room. I think maybe 300 or 400 people. And then I do some quick statistics in my head. And I realize that by this time next year, roughly 4 or 5 of you, according to statistics, 4 or 5 of you will be dead by this time next year. Which 4 or 5 is it? And don't just look at the old ones. The young ones die too. So this is just statistics. This is what happens. Some of us will die. And it's not just the people with cancer, it's the other people. Usually the ones with cancer survive and live a long life. It's the other ones who die. So what's going on? Why do such things happen? Because it is part of the contract of life that these things happen. You can't escape from it. But you know that sometimes one of the things which is so hard for people to accept is why is it that young people die? Why do such bad things as like a premature death happen to, say, children or people maybe only 18 or 20, 30? Especially many of you may have gone to the cancer wards for children and see these little people who haven't had much of a life, but there they are in the wards suffering from cancer. And you think, what did they do to deserve that? So young, without much of a life, and then they die. And this monk in Thailand many years ago told me this incredibly beautiful story. He said that he was meditating in a forest, in a jungle, and his hut was a very simple dwelling made of bamboo and thatch. And one night in the monsoon season there was a fierce storm, just like the one we just had a few minutes ago, but lasting much longer. The rain came thundering down, the wind was blowing everywhere, and as the storm grew stronger, there were many trees got uprooted. And being great trees in the jungle, they came crashing down onto the jungle floor. You see, whenever I give a talk, you know where you can go asleep. Every now and again, I'm going to scare you with crashing down onto the jungle floor. Bang, they went. Smash, they went. And it was so loud and so dangerous that the poor monk couldn't sleep all night. Not just because of the sound, because he was a bit afraid, because if one tree or one heavy branch fell on top of his hut, he'd be dead. It was only a thatched roof with bamboo for rafters, which would offer no protection at all from even a heavy branch. So he was up all night, hearing the thuds and crashes. And as the dawn came, the storm finished, and he went outside in the early light of morning to see the damage in the forest. And he saw many big trees had fallen to the ground, and many big branches had just missed his hut. he was very lucky to be alive. But it wasn't just the trees and the branches which he noticed. Because of the force of the wind, there were many leaves had been ripped off the trees and lay dead on the forest floor. And he noticed most of those leaves, most of the leaves torn off from the tree the night before, were the old brown leaves. Leaves which had lived a full life on the twigs and branches and now lay dead on the floor. But amongst those brown leaves he saw many yellow leaves, many middle-aged leaves, some green leaves, some youngsters were also lying dead on the floor. And amongst those green leaves he saw a few leaves which were so freshly green he knew they could only have sprouted forth the day before. Even those very, very baby leaves lay dead on the floor because of the force of the wind. He got what we call in Buddhism an insight, which explains some of the mysteries of life. But to confirm his insight, he looked up at the trees to see what leaves were left. And as you would expect, most of the leaves still clinging to life on the branches and twigs were the green leaves, the young, healthy ones. But even though some of those green leaves lay dead, amongst those green leaves on the twigs and branches were many yellow leaves. They had survived and were still alive. And there were many brown leaves as well, curly old brown leaves, which still clung on to life even though the young ones had died. And he realized that this is the nature of a storm. The storm takes mostly the old leaves, but it also picks a few middle-aged, young, and even baby leaves. Just like the storms of death, which come through our communities, through our families and friends, it mostly takes the old brown leaves. And there are a few curly old brown leaves in this room this evening. Still alive. And it takes a lot of yellow leaves as well. But it still leaves some yellow leaves, while it takes the young leaves. Old people are left living, while children die. And he realized that this is the nature of life and death. Death is like a storm blowing through our communities. It does take most of the old ones, but it also takes, by nature, young ones too. When we understand that, we understand why it is that young people die. It is just part of being born as a human being. It's not as if something has gone wrong. It is just the nature which we have to accept and live with, because this is the truth of our world. But when these things happen, we think, my goodness, it's a terrible thing which has happened to us. It's a bad thing. And the reason I'm giving this talk is actually to say how we can understand why bad things happen to us, and then what to do about them when they do happen. But before I go even deeper into that, as a Buddhist monk, sometimes I think, is it a bad thing which happened to you? And I'll tell the following story. This is one of my favorite stories of recent times. If you've been listening to me on the internet, you'd have heard this several times in recent months, because it's a great story of the king who was a hunter. Many, many centuries ago, a king went out hunting with his entourage of guards and ministers and who knows what. And as he was out hunting in the forest, he scratched his finger. He cut it. And in his entourage was his doctor. So he called his doctor over and he said, "Look, I've cut my finger. Is it going to be all right?" and he's